thank you all for coming to this Ray Talk. I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm so glad to be talking about this subject. Some of you are in our Course in Miracles podcast group, and Sandra and I are very much enjoying that, and I hope you're getting something out of the podcasts. And this week, we had a series of lessons. We started a series of lessons that's very essential in the Course in Miracles. And it deals with forgiveness, as you know. 121 says, forgiveness is the key to happiness. And 122 says, forgiveness offers everything I want. So, of course, if we're really paying attention, we would ask ourselves, this must be really important if forgiveness gives us everything we want, and it's the key to happiness. We have to give this some serious attention. So I think we're all getting that. And then a couple lessons later, it says, let me remember I'm one with God. So Sandra and I read that lesson this week, and I said, well, that's a good theme for me to speak on Sunday. It's a very brilliant lesson. It right off the bat, it gives a lot of light. Even the first paragraph, if you applied the first paragraph, you'd almost be in nirvana. And so I think the question is, what is it we need to realize or do within ourselves that we can receive this and have it be not only a good idea, but also our truth, you know? It's our truth that we live by. We bring it into full application. And that was always Tara Singh's, he was always honest, like about if you're not bringing the Course into application, it's just another meaningless activity that you're doing. So let's get clear right off the bat that this work is to be lived, not to be learned and talked about and intellectually gone over. No, it's to be lived. So in order to do that, we find, well, if we're going to live that truth, usually we have to change something in our life the way we're living it, or see something differently that we haven't seen before. So I just jotted down that first paragraph, and I just wanted to recite it to you. I've got it on a little card right here. So I wanted to just start with this first paragraph in that lesson, 124. Let us remember, or let me remember, I am one with God. So it says, today we will again give thanks for our identity in God. Our home is safe, protection guaranteed in all we do, power and strength available in all our undertakings. We can fail in nothing. Everything we touch takes on a shining light that blesses and that heals. At one with God and with the universe, we go our way rejoicing with the thought that God Himself goes everywhere with us. When I read that paragraph, I said to Sandra, wow, go our way rejoicing, and we can fail in nothing. And we looked at each other and we said, wow, there's something we haven't been getting in our life that this paragraph is offering. So we were delighted to read it, but at the same time, we were being brutally honest with ourselves in, have we really brought this into application? I mean, you'd be happy all the time with no breaks in between applying this lesson. I go the world rejoicing, we go our way rejoicing. So what is it that is blocking us from not rejoicing? I think this was the question that Sandra and I were asking ourselves. What is it we need to do to remember that we're one with God? Tara Singh used to say miracles are very swift, in that they take you out of one mindset and put you in another mindset, and that shift is like, it doesn't take time. It doesn't take time, it doesn't take effort, it doesn't take a to-do list. Oh, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. No, it just requires that you see something and you see that, oh, the way I thought before was never going to get me there, and I'm going to let go of that. So in the letting go, a couple things happen. First of all, you're a bit discombobulated because you're used to using your ego's thought system, and now all of a sudden you know that's not going to work anymore. So no matter what I do from the ego, I'm never going to be in this full awareness that I'm one with God. I might have some kind of peak moments where I feel good, but then I sort of fall back down into the valley, you know, and I can't maintain that. So we see at some point that the thought system we use is not the thought system that's going to give us miracles. It's not going to give us this feeling of we can fail in nothing, right? I mean, we would say, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and I'm glad the Course in Miracles told me that. But then we go out into our work and we're still a little bit uncertain. Well, yeah, like I could do this and maybe it'll work, but maybe I'll fail. And so we're still in the duality of success, failure, fear, you know, all that stuff that comes with the duality. We're still engaged in it. So then this lesson comes along. It says, let me remember I'm one with God. And then these are the qualities that you're going to experience when you are one with God. I'm not going to have any fear of failure. I'm going to feel totally protected. My home is safe. I bless everything. I heal everything. There's a light that goes with me. I walk the world rejoicing. You know, these are pretty high states. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, you can't read that paragraph and not have some kind of a notion that there is this state of being that the Course is trying to lead us to. And in this state of being, it's like a heaven on earth, you know? Yes, we're here in a body and we have our things to do, but even within that world of things to do in a body, we can have this connection to our divine source that makes our life constant joy. And that's what the Course is trying to lead us to. And as students of the Course in Miracles, we stick with it, I mean, some of us have stuck with it for 35 years, 40 years. Can we honestly say we're in our heaven on earth all the time? You ask yourself. That's the question. Because this is what this lesson is trying to lead us to. Let us remember we are one with God. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the word God, because I think we need to clear that up. And I was meditating last night and I was thinking, well, the Course uses that word a lot, God. And I wanted to see how soon does the Course use that word. So I went back to the beginning of the text, right? And the text starts with the 50 principles, you know, the 50 principles of miracles. So I'm reading the 50 principles and I'm seeing, down about 4 or 5 principles, it starts using this word God. And so right off the bat, it uses the word God. Some people come to us and they have trouble with that. You know, they have trouble with the word God, and they have trouble with all the organized religion that was sort of pumped into them as a child, and they spent a lot of energy to get themselves free of a lot of that dogma. So here's the Course in Miracles coming back using some of the same terminology. And for some people, the Course doesn't mesh with them because of that. But I always say the Course redefines those words. All of those words that were so charged for us, salvation, sin, God, you know, all those things we learned in our childhood religion, the Course comes along and redefines those words. I like to think of God as just the life force. You know, there's a force of life that created things, and life is here. Obviously, we're all engaged in life. We're here, we're moving around, we have consciousness, and we're in this life, okay? And this life is a kind of a stream of energy, and we engage in that. And I just like to think that, well, God is just that stream of life energy that's flowing through me, flowing through you, flowing through, you know, the atmosphere. Some of the more indigenous cultures saw that everything was alive. They didn't think of life in terms of, well, humans have life, animals have life, but rocks don't have life. No, they thought every molecule, every atom in creation is alive. So then the rocks are alive, the trees are alive, the plants are alive, the ocean is alive. So all of this life force is in everything. It's what makes it exist. I think if we saw God in that term, we would have no problem with the word God. And I think we have to get to that point where we see God in that larger context of life. It's a force. It's a it's a love that flows everywhere. When you get to the more subtle lessons of the Course, it equates God and love. And it was like some of the last lessons before this section, God being love is also happiness. So what a beautiful lesson. It's like, well, now I know that God is love, and also now I know that love is happiness, and they're all the same thing. So then God ceases to become this childhood, vengeful, punish you if you're bad kind of an entity that's, meting out, oh, you can either go this way to heaven or God will send you this way to hell. All these concepts that we learned from childhood that were absolutely frightening and terrifying almost. You read the Course in Miracles and it undoes them instantly. It just takes all that away. It says, well, what you learned before doesn't have any meaning. So you'd be better off just starting like saying, I don't know anything, and we'll start from scratch, and we'll enter this kind of an empty space, and then we'll redefine everything that you learned in different terms. Might be the same word, like G-O-D, that's the word that they used when we were 5 years old, right? But it's totally redefined. It's totally new energy in your vocabulary, in your mind, in your being. You have a different relationship with it. It doesn't have the old charge. It doesn't have the old kind of a feeling of a contradiction. Like, well, if God is a punishing God, but he's also a loving God, that's a contradiction. I reject that. And we were right to reject that. A lot of us rejected that. And we left our childhood religions. And we should have left our childhood religions. We were courageous to do that. And I don't think any of us regret that. And then when you look back on those things that gave us the values from when we were young, like I was brought up Methodist, Sandra was brought up Lutheran, my father was brought up Catholic. You look back on those things, and it's sort of like the Course says, only loving thoughts are true, and everything else you just need to forget it. So you can even look back on your childhood religion and see the good qualities. They were trying to teach us the good qualities of being a good human being. So you see the good part of it, and then the rest of it, you can thank God you had the Course in Miracles that undid it. Mostly this kind of a negative, punishing notion of God. So that's what I was seeing when I was thinking about this lesson. Let me remember I'm one with God. Well, we're certainly not going to want to be one with something that's punishing or fearful or vengeful. Even misinterpretations of the Bible says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I mean, well, yeah, even if you do leave vengeance in the domain of God, it doesn't help you relate to God very much better. Why would you even want to think God is a vengeful entity? So this thing about getting God right when we study the Course in Miracles, it's very important. I think, now I remember when I was reading those first principles of the miracles, 1 through 50 in chapter 1, the first time it uses the word God, it says, God is the giver of life. God is the giver of life. I said, I like that. God is the giver of life. I can handle that concept of God. God is the giver of life. So if we see God is like this life force, very positive, creative, happy, loving force, I have no problem relating to that God. And that's the God that the Course in Miracles is putting forth. So then when we get to lesson, we've read quite a bit already, we've done quite a few lessons of undoing already, and we get to this lesson let me remember I'm one with God, it makes sense to us. And not only that, we want to remember, especially if, these qualities are going to be given, like safety, certainty, walking the world rejoicing, bringing light, having a healing power. Those I don't think there'd be anybody of us here that would say, oh, I don't want that. That's not a quality I would like to embody. No, all those qualities are very lofty. They're very healing. Just reading the paragraph is healing. One thing we're trying to do with the podcast is slow our life down enough that we make the space to give to our divine connection. Everybody has one, right? Everybody has a divine connection, but we don't always give attention to it. So part of the purpose of the lesson, part of the purpose of the podcast that Sandra and I do, is to slow our life down enough to disengage and, get ourselves away from the computer and the iPhone long enough to give attention to this divine connection. That's what the lessons are doing too, essentially. And we've noticed, and you've noticed, I'm sure, as students of the course makes very little demand when you first start reading it. As far as your attention, it says, oh yeah, just think of this a minute in the morning and a minute in the evening. And then it adds a little bit more. Okay, after you've gone through about 30 or 40 lessons, it says, well, yeah, think of this 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the afternoon, 5 minutes in the evening. And then it gets it even more like, okay, think of this every 4 times a day. Then, every hour, think of it. And every hour, 5 minutes. And then you do a review and it says, well, think of one on the half hour, think of the other one on the half hour. So it's upping the ante of how much attention you give to it. Why is it doing that? And why do we have so much resistance to do that? Well, the reason it's doing that is because our minds are so scattered and focused on other things that we give priority to. And now, I'm not saying those priorities are bad. If we have a thriving business, there's a lot of attention we have to give to the business to keep the business going. And that's good, that's a good thing. In the midst of that good thing, we also have to give attention to this, which is our divine connection. And that's why it ups the ante. It says, well, think of this 4 times a day, then get yourself in a place where you can think of it every hour. And we find that a bit challenging. And then we find that we don't do it. So then we say, well, okay, I noticed this in myself. I got a lot of resistance. I have a lot of unwillingness, Tara Singh called it. And that unwillingness has a power. So then we start to face the unwillingness, and then we do things like, well, what if I just set my timer to go off every hour? Well, so we do that. Sandra and I have been doing that for a while. And yeah, it works. You can remember it. And then we notice some days, well, we don't want to set the timer. We know it works, but we don't want to do it, so we don't set the timer. So we go through this whole dance, with the practice of the Course in Miracles. And I think we've all probably noticed this in ourselves. And then you get to the point where, well, you actually like doing the practice. It's like something you can't wait to do because you feel so good when you do it. Like, why wouldn't you want to feel good? So then you start doing it just because you want to feel that connection. And I think that's where we need to be, and that's where many of us are already there with that now. We've studied the Course long enough that we receive this very deep kind of satisfaction when we give ourselves that space to be with the lesson or be with the ideas that the Course is putting forth to us. So I think that's a good place to be. And then the practice becomes like something you want to do. We were in India recently, you all know, for quite a long time, a month, and we were in Harakan with a lot of our friends, Indian friends we've known for years, and our group, people that we took with us. It was just a wonderful time. For me, being in Harakan is like, if talk about heaven on earth, for me that is just the perfect place to experience that. So one of the things that I got this year was this Om Namah Shivaya mantra. And Sandra and I have been doing this Om Namah Shivaya mantra for years. But it was the first time I heard, because some of our Indian friends gave a lecture on it, and they said something about, well, it doesn't even take force fully until you've said it 625,000 times, right? So we're thinking, oh my goodness, 625,000 times. I mean, we were saying 10 rounds, which is like 1,080 a day. How long would it take us to get to 625,000? That's like a couple of years. So anyhow, I was thinking about this, and then when I came home, I started upping my rounds per day. You know, I was saying three rounds of 10, so that would be 3,240, right? And I was doing that in the morning and doing that in the evening, and feeling really good when I was doing it. So I'm just talking about the practice. So when we give attention to something that is holy, or at least we deem that it's holy, the premise is that this is a holy thing. This is increasing our divine connection, like the lesson in the Course. How do we feel about that? And is it something we kind of can't wait to get to? Or is it a chore? Is it a ritual? Because we know rituals don't necessarily work, you know, unless we make contact with that, whatever that depth of that ritual is. It's just a meaningless blah, 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 right? And we don't want that. We've all been around the block enough to know that an empty ritual is just an empty ritual. It's not going to do a damn thing. So, and we don't want to turn our practice of the Course in Miracles into an empty ritual. We want to receive the juice from it, the life force. We want to receive the connection in actuality. That has to be our truth, our core connection. So when it says, let me remember I am one with God, we have to make a demand on ourselves to make that connection. So by the time we've practiced that lesson, let me remember I am one with God, by the end of the day, you have the certainty you are one with God. Maybe it wouldn't take you a whole day. Maybe you can do that lesson in a different atmosphere of attention and receive it instantly. So what would require you to receive it instantly. Tarsing used to stress the stillness, the quiet. And if you recall, a couple lessons later, well, no, it's actually the next lesson. In quiet, I receive God's word today, right? That's the next lesson. Let me remember I'm one with God. Then the next one is, in quiet, I receive God's word today. Well, that's the key, you guys. It's the quiet. Well, what is the quiet? The first thing you notice when you do that lesson is your mind is not quiet at all. It's got all kinds of junk in there and to-do lists, and you sit down to be quiet and you think of all the things you got to do for the rest of the day and in the morning, and who did you not email from yesterday, and who do you have to respond to, and what do you have to put up on the website that you didn't put up and you should have, you know, stuff like that, right? So you sit down and your mind just goes boom and just tells you all the things you didn't do. That's not quiet. However, it can get you to the quiet. You don't want to resist it. Listen to your brain. Your brain's not the quiet, but we're trying to silence the brain. But you don't silence it by fighting it or judging it. You just listen to it. So you just listen to what your brain is sharing. Oh yeah, I got to write that person back. Oh yeah. I didn't send the invoice to Tammy. You know, whatever it is. All that's going to come to your mind when you sit down. Just let it. Just watch it. After a while, it's shared the main stuff it wants you to hear, your brain. You know, it's going to share all this stuff you didn't do. All your incompletions, it's going to share that. You're going to listen and say, oh, thank you, I got it. So it shared everything it needs to share, and then it starts to slow down. Like, it's not as urgent, you know? Then maybe you start noticing the light in the room, the chair, things. It slows down enough that you might look at the vase of flowers and see how beautiful it is. It's like maybe you see it in a different way, not like before. You see the beauty. So more space, more quiet comes in. Your thoughts slow down. They slow down. Then you notice your thoughts are kind of like a bead on a string, you know, like you got a mala with beads, and then there's a space in between. Well, now you start to notice the space in between. That space is the quiet. Thought, space, and the space gets a little bigger, and the thoughts get fewer. And then finally, you're with this quiet, this space. You know, I'm reading this book on Zen now, and it talks about the mind, it talks about the void, but it says the void, it's not emptiness, it's not nothingness. It's a space I mean, when you say space, what is it? It doesn't have something in it, it's space, but it's a container for stuff. If you didn't have space, you wouldn't have a place to put things. But the space is like alive, right? So you're in this space, it's very beautiful. It's very quiet. That's where you read the lesson of the Course. So before you even pick up the book, take a few minutes, maybe even 2 or 3 or 5, and just do this little meditation we just did right now. Just observe your thoughts, the mind's going to tell you the to-do list, all the things, your incompletions. Listen, thank it. Look around, notice everything. It's almost like you're blessing, you're receiving blessing and you're sending blessing. You're not judging anything. You're just listening to the thoughts, seeing. So your senses are like heightened, you know? They're like not preoccupied. It's not a state of no sensing. You're just not attaching your senses to stuff. You're just observing, and you see the beauty of everything, and then you notice that things are slowing down. There's a stillness, there's a silence. You don't have so many thoughts. Then that's the place you can read the lesson. So I'm gonna read this paragraph now that we're all there, right? We're kind of all in this space now. I'm gonna read the same paragraph that we read before, and you'll notice the difference. Today we will again give thanks for our identity in God. Our home is safe, protection guaranteed in all we do. Power and strength available in all our undertakings. We can fail in nothing. Everything we touch takes on a shining light that blesses and that heals. At one with God and with the universe, we go our way rejoicing with the thought that God Himself goes everywhere with us. Now, I don't know about you, but that was a lot different than when I read it the first time. What was different about it? We were in the space to receive it. our minds had slowed down enough, we weren't distracted, we weren't thinking about stuff we have to do later. We weren't thinking about how we don't like the word God. No, we cleared that up. Let me remember I am one with God. And then all that we just read is ours. We have remembered it. We make the connection. We feel the love of God flowing in our life, in ourself. It's what we extend to our family, our friends, our mate. We go the world rejoicing. We go our way rejoicing. That's the result. Why would you want to remember you're one with God? Well, because it's pure happiness to do that. It's not a belief system. You don't have to join any church. You don't have to join anything. It's just that connection you have with your truth, your self-identity. That's what it says in the first line. Today we will again give thanks for our identity in God. Well, what is that? That's who we are. The whole Course in Miracles is just to introduce you to who you are and undo the personality self, whatever you want to call that, the ego self. Undo in the sense that we see there's a higher, there's a deeper, there's a more universal connection we have to make. It's not about, quote unquote, killing the ego. We all need an ego to function in this worldly plane. Somebody asked Krishnamurti, well, you said we should transcend our thought, and well, what would happen if we didn't have any thought? And he said, don't be ridiculous. You still need your thought to catch your plane. If you didn't have thought, you wouldn't know what airport to go through to, So at a certain dimension, certain level, you do need your thought. But then there's another level that we have to make contact with that's beyond our thought. And this is what the sages and the saints have made the contact with. This oneness of their true self that we all share. We make the contact with our true self, then we realize, well, my true self is the same one you have. So how can I have any judgments about you if the person I'm judging is me? I've ended the separation long enough that I see, well, if I send out a judgment and an attack and an anger at somebody, it's going to come back to me because our self is joined in some way. So even at the ego level, that's true. If I attack another ego, my ego is going to feel bad. No matter what, it's a law. What you send out, you get back. Whether it's at the ego level or the true self level, what you send out, you get back. The beauty of making this contact with the self as you remember, when it says, I remember I'm one with God, well, that's also remembering who you are, your true self. Well, the beauty of that is only joy lives there. You get to that level and only joy can be in that level. So it's happiness. And we would all say, well, yeah, we're all life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're all after that. Well, okay, so the Course is going to lay out a roadmap for you to get there. And here it is. Let me remember I'm one with God. Let me remember I'm one with life. I'm one with love. I'm one with perfect happiness, peace and joy. States of being that have no opposite, transcending duality altogether. And here's another really subtle teaching that I'm getting. I'm reading this book by this Zen master, Hung Po. And I remembered it was one of the books that Tara Singh had at his workshops. He had this little Words of Wisdom bookstore, right? And it wasn't just his books. He sold Krishnamurti books and, the poets, Rilke, Walt Whitman, Henry David Thoreau. He had all kinds of words of wisdom. Well, somehow I blundered into this book that I remembered, oh yeah, that was at that bookstore, and I even had a copy years ago, right? So I reordered the copy. Hung Po, he was a Zen master in like 1,000 years ago in China. And so I'm reading this book, and he's talking about mind, right? And he's saying only mind, there's only mind that exists. And it's non-differentiated, it's non-dual, it doesn't have high and low, it doesn't have enlightened and unenlightened. So anytime you're making these dualistic distinctions, you're not with the mind. Well, I'm seeing the Course in Miracles is very similar. When it talks about God, when it talks about love, these are states that don't have opposites, all right? And they're totally quiet and totally at peace and totally still. And that's where your true self abides, in that bliss, right? Bliss. So I was sharing a little bit before, we have this young student from Latvia. And she was pregnant and she was overdue. And she wrote and said, oh yeah, it's 9 months, but he's been in here like 2 weeks extra. Well, the 2 weeks turned into almost a whole month and he's still in there, right? He doesn't want to come out. And she said, well, yeah, I know why he doesn't want to come out, because it's so blissful in there. He doesn't want to come out to not bliss. I said, yeah, no, he doesn't want to come out to not bliss. So I gave her this affirmation. I said, I am in bliss inside and I am in bliss outside. And no matter where I am, I'm in bliss. Well, this is the non-dual state. We're all after this. This is the whole purpose of the Course in Miracles, to put us in inner peace, but it's also perfect peace. It's like a peace that doesn't have an opposite. It's a peace that doesn't have war. We think, oh, there's a peace, and then you can fall out of that, and then there's conflict and war and trouble. And, oh, life is just, from one to the next, and you're in it for a while, but then you can't keep it, and then you fall out, and then, you're back in conflict again. Well, this peace, it doesn't have an opposite. So my neighbor has been a real good teacher for me. You all know about my neighbor being noisy. And I got to the point where even the noise was peaceful. I wasn't reacting, and I just said that's just as much part of this dimension, love in this dimension, as anything else. And when I got to that point, he quieted down. We've been back from India almost a month now, and he's really been quiet. A few times we hear this and that, but in general, I think I passed the test. So, because I passed the test, I get the result of that, which is the quiet. I stopped judging him. I stopped reacting. I stopped feeling that kind of inside. And it worked. In quiet, I receive God's word today. Well, what's the word going to tell you? God's peace and joy are mine. There is only that. Even amidst noise, there's peace. So that peace doesn't have an opposite. The remembrance that we are one with God can't even remember when we weren't, because we never were. That's beautiful. Can you imagine when you really remember you were one with God, and you wake up and you say, well, even when I had forgotten I was one with God, I was still one with God. So it doesn't even have an opposite. Like, I'm one with God, I remember it, and then the times that I didn't remember it, I still was one with God. So there was no difference. That's so beautiful. Don't you get it? Like, even when I was asleep, my real self was totally awake. It was only my ego that was asleep. And then when I let go of that, it doesn't matter. You know, when you wake up for a dream, the dream, you say, wow, it was just a dream. It wasn't even real. This is the same when you wake up from your ego. Well, my ego wasn't even real, and I was still my true self even when I was stuck in my ego. Just like when there was noise next door, the quiet was always there, and I wasn't seeing it or hearing it. I was hearing the noise. I was hearing the, I wish he'd stop. No, but when I really got the lesson, it's like I can hear the noise. It's like music to my ears. Oh, it's just our neighbor being himself. Yeah, something like that.